be alive in this land of ours. Good to drive in this land of ours.
Hello, Canada hockey fans in the United States.
The Hockey Time Machine.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hockey Time Machine. I'm Glenn Dreyfus. Technically, at the Hockey Hall of Fame, he can't be called an honored member, but we're certainly honored he's spending time with us. Our good friend and frequent host of this program, Kevin Shea, who moonlights as editorial and education facilitator at the Hockey Hall of Fame. And as he'll demonstrate, as he has done in the past, he's an astute writer, researcher, and storyteller. Now, before his head gets too big, let's say hi to Kevin Shea. Hi, Kevin.
Hello there, Glenn, and thank you for the Hall of Fame type introduction. Wow. Always great to visit back to Hockey Time Machine, sitting in the host or guest chair, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you this evening as well.
As mentioned, in a few minutes, we're going to turn our attention to Kevin's remarkable book, Jack in the Box. And after you hear Kevin tell the story, you'll understand why I use the word remarkable. But first, the new class of Hall of Fame inductees is about to have their moment. So, Kevin, what can you tell us about what goes on every early November?
Absolutely. It's a very, very special time. In fact, very candidly, it's the most special time for the Hockey Hall of Fame through the course of the calendar year. So there's a selection committee, and they are objective. They are not employees of the Hockey Hall of Fame, but they are 18 members plus a chairperson, and they decide who's going to be honored with distinction as the newest inductees to the Hockey Hall of Fame. And this year, as you can see, we've got 7 people going in, and it's really kind of a special class this year. So from the hockey side of things, we've got Natalie Darwitz, who with her former teammate, Chrissy Wendell with the U.S. national team, are both going in together. We've got Pavel Datsyuk, who distinguished himself with the Detroit Red Wings and also an international career in his home in Russia. We've got Jeremy Roenick, who has been waiting a long time to be debuting in the Hockey Hall of Fame and was very, very emotional when he found out. JR is a new honored member coming up in November 11th. We've got Shea Weber, who did so well with the Nashville Predators and then shocked the world when he was part of a trade with PK Subban going to Montreal. And injuries shortened his career, but it was still a distinguished career for him as well. And then 2 builders to go into, Colin Campbell and David Poyle. So 7 really deserving inductees this year, and they come from vast areas of the world, vast areas of hockey, but they all have distinguished themselves as having the ability to be voted in as distinguished members of the Hockey Hall of Fame as honored members. So the selection committee sits down together. They take the nominated players that come into the meeting. They don't have the players coming in, the nominations, and they sit and hash them out. And you have to get 75% of the votes, or you don't make it in. So it's kept very secretive who was discussed, what was said, who voted for who, all of those sorts of things. But when it all comes out at the end, we find out who the new inductees will be. And November 11th, we will see them go into the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Meanwhile, for you, how's it going breaking in new chairman-elect Mike Gartner? He had big shoes to fill, Lanny McDonald.
Boy, does he ever. But he's been around for a long time. He's been on the selection committee. He's been the chair of the selection committee as well. He's now going to take over as the president and CEO of the Hockey Hall of Fame. But more to the point as well is our president and CEO of the Hockey Hall of Fame, not of the board, is Jeff Denemy, and he's also retiring. And so we'll have a new chairman. We'll have a new CEO and president next year as well. So there's new faces, new bums in the chair, some fresh blood, some new ideas. So it's an exciting time, but it's a melancholy time too, because first Jeff Denemy has been there since they moved into the new building in 1993. He even precedes that, worked his way up from being just one of the gang to running with the chief financial officer and then president and CEO. And then Lanny McDonald has just done a wonderful job. He's a terrific ambassador for the game, for the Hall of Fame. He opens a lot of doors because of his hockey heritage, but he's a very, very intelligent man too, and a very personable man. So to say goodbye to those two is definitely melancholy. They'll still be around, but it's still melancholy. And then one more, if you don't mind, is the previous chair of the board, Bill Hay, passed away on Friday. And Bill was larger than life in many, many ways. Great big hulking man who had started his hockey life playing out west in Canada and then down to the US, to the University of Colorado, came up and played with the Chicago Blackhawks and was the Calder Trophy winner in 1960 and a Stanley Cup champion in 1961, retired in 1967, and then was a part owner of the Calgary Flames and worked so hard with Hockey Canada and the International Ice Hockey Federation and joined the Hockey Hall of Fame on the selection committee and later as chairman and of the board chair of the Hockey Hall of Fame. So to lose him as well is a big loss. But anyway, it's time to move on, and we'll see where we go, but we will keep them all close to our hearts.
Bill Hay, who lived to the ripe old age of 88, and I'm glad you mentioned him. He was on my list of things to have you discuss because he had a remarkable career as a player, as an executive, and then at the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he did all of that for sure. But then there's the human side, and everybody that we've mentioned today has got a human side that we don't necessarily see that much. Bill was a terrific husband to Nancy, and a wonderful father to his son Donald, who had some challenges. And beyond that, he just had another side, the fun side. He played Santa Claus at the Hockey Hall of Fame Christmas parties as well. He was just a riot. We loved when he came in to do business at the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto. He was so personable, remembered us all, asked us. In my case, my partner is Nancy, so he always was able to ask, "So how's your Nancy going?" And I was always amazed that A, he remembered B, let alone that he remembered my wife's name as well. But he was just a lovely, lovely man, and we really will miss him for sure.
Thank you for that. And one of the things we love about you, Kevin, is that you never forget the human side, that these are not just hockey players or hockey professionals. These are human beings who happen to have chosen hockey as a career. And I love that you never let us forget that.
Well, it's so important, Glenn. I mean, you've got a personal side that we've had a few opportunities to get to know you a little bit more, and I've got mine as well. The people that we've mentioned, Jeff Denemy, just a lovely man. Mike Gartner, just salt of the earth as well. Lanny McDonald, as I said, just fun and funny and a great business person too. So lots and lots of wonderful people involved with the game of hockey. And I've been blessed, as we all have, to get to know a few of them, whether it be electronically or in person.
As the education facilitator, you do a lot of interaction with the public. And this debate that in any sport will never be settled. Why is player X in the Hall of Fame? Why is player Z not in the Hall of Fame? When you get questions like that, how do you answer them?
It's a tough one, Glenn, because they come fast and furious and they don't stop. They kind of wind down a little bit as the year goes along, but they do not stop. All I can say is that the selection committee is 18 very, very valued members who have great backgrounds. They do a great deal of homework as well. They do not work for the Hockey Hall of Fame, so they don't have that tie. And it's a secret ballot, at least as far as we are to know outside as well, who was nominated, who was voted on, or whatever. So we have to abide by what the selection committee decides upon. One thing I'd like to put forward, though, is a lot of names come up very frequently and they aren't necessarily nominated. And every one of us has the option or the opportunity to nominate somebody. Doesn't mean they're necessarily going to make the meeting, but to put forward a terrific story on why they should be an honored member in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Then you have to find your hero. You have to find somebody on that selection committee to bring it into the meeting. So these are difficult things. These aren't just a list of players that are all of a sudden thought about in that meeting and, hey, what do you think about whatever? It's not like that at all. It's very well researched in advance. Excuse me one second. Pardon me. It's very well researched. It's very well debated, and there's not room for everybody. They can have four male players, two female players, two builders, and one or two officials as well to go in. So there's a finite number of people. Otherwise, we just open the gate and anybody can come in. It's an honor to be nominated. It's even more of an honor to be elected. And we have to appreciate that the selection committee has done their duty. One of the things that comes up regularly, Glenn, is well, it's all white males who are doing it. Well, that's not the case at all. There are women on the selection committee. There are players from other countries on the selection committee. It's a really interesting mix of people. Go to the website if you feel so inclined, hhof.com, and then go to the selection committee. Go to the induction, and underneath there's a drop down situation where you can find out who's on the selection committee. And I think you'd be very surprised to see, I don't mean you, Glenn, I just mean people in general will be very surprised to see who's on the selection committee.
Also, don't go to the Hockey Hall of Fame website right now. Wait till my interview with Kevin is over. Then, spend time going there. Something else you brought up, which is transparency. I see value in having it be behind closed doors, because then when the discussion goes on, people can really speak their minds. Some people would like the process to have increased transparency. Where do you come down on that?
Well, and it's not necessarily because I derive a paycheck from the Hockey Hall of Fame, but I really like it this way. But we see the Baseball Hall of Fame, the Football Hall of Fame, the Industrialist Hall of Fame, and everybody's got a new manner to elect their people. I think that it would be hurtful to find out that a certain player, it would be hurtful to the player or to the personality to find out that they were just outside of it and they have to sit for another year, or that they didn't get as many votes as they had hoped for, or that their name wasn't brought up. I think it would be hurtful to them and for their fans who follow them as well. I like the fact that it's secret. I like the fact that we present, not me, but the Hockey Hall of Fame and the selection committee present who's going to be inducted, and then go over the process of having each of the inductees talking about what it was like for them to be receiving the phone call from, in this case, Mike Gartner and Lanny McDonald. So it's pretty special that way. I like it that way. I see the merit in the other way as well, but I think it would be hurtful to find out the reality that so-and-so just didn't make it at all. They only got one vote. They didn't get any votes or whatever. That would really hurt. I can assure you that if I was one of those players with my fingers and toes crossed, hoping to get in, and found out that I didn't get any votes whatsoever, I'd be crushed. I'd go into the fetal position and stay in my bedroom for the next 364 days. There we are.
Again, you're bringing up, and quite wisely, the human equation to this, and points well made.
There we are. Yeah, it's just, I don't think there's any ideal way to do it.
Yeah.
And I think this is a very good way for the time being. And none of the selection committee is to talk about who was discussed or who got votes. It's as closed mouthed rather as that.
One last honored member question, and this isn't just a Hockey Hall of Fame question, but as you have alluded to, any of the Halls of Fame, like any group, most of the honored members were wonderful people, as well as being great players. A few weren't. That's going to be true about any group. What is your opinion about whether off the ice behavior should have any impact on whether a player or builder belongs, or even about those who were previously inducted?
So I'm going to rub some people the wrong way, I'm afraid, and I don't mean to, but let me just move forward with this. I think that what is most important and imperative is that what they accomplished on the ice, what they accomplished in their boardroom, in their suite for their team as well. I think if we were to take a magnifying glass with a lot of the inductees, of the honored members that are in now, and we were to measure them by their person and their off ice, away from the game habits, we would lose a great number of them. So it's kind of going against the grain. There are things in the bylaw that want them to not only excel on the ice, but be exemplary people as well. That would be ideal. But I just think that everybody has some kind of a skeleton in the closet. I got a speeding ticket once years ago. Okay, sorry. No, I'm being facetious now, but I mean, if we were to examine things, would Harold Ballard, for example, he had some skeletons in his closet. He went to jail for a while. Should he be in the Hockey Hall of Fame? Well, that's debatable for sure. There are players who had some situations off the ice. Should they be in the Hall of Fame? It's so hard to know. So there's a dividing line. I'm kind of on the fence, but I do lean one way that it should be. So let me just run parallel. If I was on the Baseball Hall of Fame, I would vote for Pete Rose to go in. I dislike the fact that he bet. I even more dislike the fact, in fact, I hate the fact he bet on his team. But I think that what he accomplished on the base paths merits an induction into the Baseball Hall of Fame. It's unfortunate that he's passed away and will never see that honor himself, but that's where I stand. So to be debated on or off this call, and people can send their opinions to me or you or whatever as well. But it's one where you just can't win the debate, candidly.
No, it'll never end. And frankly, it's a lot of fun also to have those debates, because there is no one right or perfect answer,
Right.
as you say. And I do want to point out to everybody, I did not tell Kevin ahead of time what these questions were going to be. And it's not his job to speak for the entire Hockey Hall of Fame. But after hearing what you have to say, it's hard to argue with. So I think you have a very valid argument.
One person's opinion. That's all I can offer. I'm not the spokesperson, as you mentioned, for sure. I'm just one man with an opinion, and whether my opinion has any merit is very debatable as well. So there we are.
All right, let's get to the main topic, which is, you have told a lot of remarkable stories in your first 20 books. First 20 books? Oh, that's really saying something. But this latest one may top them all. The title is Jack and the Box. The Jack is Jack McLean, who played 3 years for the Maple Leafs during World War II. And the box, well, therein lies the tale. that we're going to probably just scratch the surface of. To start, Kevin, after your dad died, you were going through his things as family members do.
Yeah.
And you found a small homemade wooden box. What was inside?
Yeah. Yeah. It was a revelation for sure. Um, First of all, it was locked. So, and I shook it a couple times and realized there was something inside, but I didn't know what it was. And I didn't want to ruin the box because it was something that Dad probably made when he was in grade 8 or something like that in his shop class. You could see that he had used a punch to put his initials in. The nails were pretty good in the four corners, but they weren't perfect. The wood was just a little bit off, so I didn't want to ruin the box because it was something of my dad's, and I idolized my father. I'm going to come back to the contents in just a moment, but I think that hockey in many ways is generational. It's something that's handed down from fathers and mothers to sons, who then handed sons and daughters, pardon me, who then handed it off to their sons and daughters or nephews and nieces or whatever. And that was the case in my family as well. My father was a great hockey man. He was a great man, but a great hockey man. He loved his hockey. He loved the Toronto Maple Leafs, and we so looked forward every Saturday night to sit on the Chesterfield. My brother Dale on one side, me on the other side, and Dad in the middle, as we watched Hockey Night in Canada. And and Mom, I'm veering way off here. Mom was downstairs doing the ironing. What? Mom, she was doing the ironing on Saturday night, but she instilled in us that if there was a fight, we were to call her. So sure enough, as little boys, it was, Mom, fight, fight, fight. And she'd come flying up the stairs, but she wasn't as savvy in hockey as the three Shea boys were. So she'd come, look at the TV screen, and, oh my God, they're starting again. No, Mom, it's a replay. So it was a family ordeal on Saturday night. I had a salad bowl with chips in them and a glass of ginger ale. My brother, the same thing, and it had to last 3 periods. And if we were really lucky, we could see the 3 stars. So anyway, so I idolized my dad. I just loved him so much, and lost him when he was only 63 years of age. So I didn't want to wreck the box, and then the curiosity got the best of me, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to. And Mom encouraged me to do that. So I pried the hinges off the back and opened it up, and was delighted to find these yellowed paper newspaper clippings of hockey players who were cut out of the newspaper. Syl Apps, and there's Babe Pratt, and there's Ted Kennedy, and there were also little bits of paper that he had written on. One was that I can remember very vividly was one where Turk Broda had taken a stick or a puck to the face, and he was bleeding. And the note from my dad in his inimitable handwriting was, Broda's got bloody nose, tucks the gauze in his pads. Well, they didn't have backup goalies then. They probably stitched him up or shoved some cotton up his nose and said, get back out there, Turk. And off they went. So I opened it up. But what I found was that there were more pictures of a guy named Jack McLean than anybody. And I know my hockey history fairly well, especially from that era, especially with the Toronto Maple Leafs of that era. But I didn't know the name, Jack McLean, didn't know. And I wanted to find out. He was clearly Dad's favorite player. And I wanted to find out why. And it became an obsession through the years. I wanted to find out everything I possibly could about Jack McLean. And that's what was in this box. And I laid it out, and that started the path that led to this book.
Your initial efforts to find out more about him, besides that he had played for the Leafs during World War II, were unsuccessful.
Yeah, they were. First of all, I have to note that the internet was, I wouldn't say it wasn't around, but it certainly wasn't commonplace at that point. So I would go down to the local library, the Toronto Public Library, and go through microfiche. There are some historians likely on this show who are shaking their heads. Oh, I remember that stuff. You wound it, and there you go, and tried to find the page that had the name on it, and there we go. So I did that and got as much information as I could, and found a great deal about him. I mean, he only played 3 years, but he had quite a career. In his very first game with the Leafs in November of 1942, he scored a goal and 2 assists in the first game. What a start. It wasn't Austin Matthews-like, but it was a pretty good start all in all. Later that year, they had a skills competition. It was raising money for the aid to Russia during the Second World War. And Jack was the fastest forward on the team. So I had that in my back pocket as well. In 1943, in the spring of 1943, he scored a playoff goal, an overtime playoff goal. He's the youngest player to this date in Toronto Maple Leaf history to score a playoff goal. He was 20 years and I think it was 11 months old. And he's also the recipient of scoring the winning goal in the second longest game in Toronto Maple Leaf history. Ken Doherty scored the longest one, but Jack scored one in the fourth overtime in a game, a semifinal game against Detroit in 1943. And
well, let me stop you there.
Okay.
Because he is credited with scoring the goal.
You're right about
he
that.
may not have, but let me go back so that
Sure.
we keep the chronology in order.
Sure, absolutely.
As if you've listened to Kevin over the last minute or two, you know he pretty much opened the Kevin Shea Detective Agency. Everything but a trench coat and a fedora, and he may have had that too. You were pursuing Jack McLean's post-playing whereabouts.
Yeah.
That went on for months, eventually for years.
Yeah,
and
very, very true.
Where I want to pick this up is eventually a Bruin scout tells you he knew of a Jack McLean in Ottawa, and he's in the phone book. So what I want to take you to next, and then we'll backtrack to his playing career and some of the highlights. What happened when you dialed the number?
Well, let me even go back a tiny bit further as well. I did so much research and found out so much about Jack that I just really was compelled to find out whether he was alive or dead. And I would ask different players from that era if they knew him. And, you know, Ted Kennedy, oh, God, great guy, Kevin. I can't do the imitation, but anyway, great guy, Kevin. Hell of a hockey player, too. Are you related to him? And I said, no, he was my dad's favorite player, and told some stories. And I did the same with Bob Davidson. Well, of course, I was his captain in 45, and I didn't get anywhere. Is he alive or dead? Do you know? I have no idea. Haven't heard about him in 50 years, you know. And it was like that. Same with Howie Meeker. Although he didn't play on that team, he said he watched Jack play and couldn't give me any information other than the fact he was a hell of a player, and he had a very different skating style. So I opened all kinds of doors to the point where I decided, okay, he could be living in Vancouver. He could be in Winnipeg. He could be in Toronto. He could be in Ottawa. He could be in St. John, New Brunswick, if he was alive at all. The Maple Leaf alumni had no record of him. The NHL alumni had no record of him. So I wrote letters to the newspapers of each of those cities. And the only one who published it was the Toronto Sun, pardon me. And the phone rang the day that it was published. The phone rang from, and I'm guessing here, 6 o'clock, right in the morning, right through until about 10 o'clock at night. And it was nonstop. And I talked to everybody, former neighbors, his first girlfriend, former teammates, scouts, as you mentioned. Jerry McNamara talked to me. Tom Watt talked to me. It was Bob Tyndall, who was the Boston Bruins scout, who is actually a friend of Hockey Time Machine. We lost him some time ago, but he was the one who said, I tried to get the autograph of everybody who'd ever won a Stanley Cup. I was in touch with him a few years ago, Kevin, and he's in Ottawa. And that opened the door. So I put all the clues together, and with Bob's leading clue, I went to the phone book. You have to remember the era. I went to the phone book and called every Jack McLean, John McLean, Jay McLean, and I called them, and I got lots of dead ends, and then I finally got one. "Hi, is this the Jack McLean who played with the Toronto Maple Leafs?" And who's asking? Well, my name is Kevin Shea, and I'm a hockey writer and a historian, and I just wanted to find out if you're the gentleman who played with the Maple Leafs and won a Stanley Cup in 1945. Well, I'm that player. Haven't watched a hockey game in years. I can't tell you very much. I said, well, okay, well, hang on. So I threw out the idea that he was not the idea, the fact that he was in the skills competition and was the fastest skater. And he stopped for a second. He said, forgot all about that. Yeah, I won a watch. It was a piece of shit. It was a geez, okay. Yeah. So here's this curmudgeonly guy. I could tell he didn't want to talk very much, but I pushed a couple of buttons and then figured, okay, I'll back off and maybe there'll be a second phone call as well. But before I got there, he said, what'd you say your name was? And I said, it's Kevin Shea. He said, I used to know some Sheas. So it's not that uncommon a name. So I said, oh yeah, who'd you know? Howard Shea. Howard Shea? That's my father. Yeah, don't you know? No, I didn't know. So he's my cousin. He's your cousin? Why have I never heard of you before? Don't you know? I said, no, I don't know. He said, well, way back, your father's father committed suicide. And so my mother called your mother or your dad's mother and said, Jesse, you've got 8 kids, no money, no pension. You can't keep those kids. You're going to have to put them into care, into the whatever was appropriate at the time, and into children's aid or whatever. And my grandmother just gritted her teeth and said, I will never give my kids up, and don't you ever get in touch with me again. So the family split. So I'd never heard the name Jack McLean. My dad had never mentioned the name Jack McLean. I asked his only remaining sibling, my Uncle Garnet. He's a couple of years younger than my dad. He's passed since, but I asked my Uncle Garnet, have you ever heard of Jack McLean? He said, I might have heard the name, but I don't know. I said, did you know he was your cousin? No. If he was my cousin, I would have known. I said, Jack, or Uncle Garnet, Jack says he's your cousin. So I checked with the widows of some of the others, and nobody knew who Jack McLean was. Well, I thought, is it an elderly man who's just not thinking? Well, it'd be odd that he'd pull a name out like Howard Shea. Not too long after that, things like Ancestry.com became somewhat common. And sure enough, I was able to dig in there and find out not only that Jack was indeed my father's cousin, but that I found the death certificate for my grandfather, my father's father. And yeah, he did commit suicide. My father, through his entire life, said that his father had died in a farm accident. That seemed to be the story. Well, there's a stigma to suicide. There's no doubt about that. Today, even more so, I think, back in the day. And they didn't say, even in the newspaper, it said it was a farm accident. Nobody said anything about suicide, but there it was right there. Death by suicide, strychnine poisoning. I can't even imagine the kind of death that he would have suffered at that time. But I was able to find out that Jack was indeed my father's cousin. For years, and I think I did this with you as well, Glenn, I called him my uncle because I thought he was, because he was 40 years older than I was. I called him my uncle, but it wasn't until not that long ago that I found out that I was his first cousin once removed. What the hell does that mean? But anyway, Jack McLean was in fact related to us, and that's why he was my dad's favorite player. He was related to him.
So one part of the mystery, those faded clippings, why there were Jack McLean faded clippings, that was answered. But the surprises kept coming because the second time you talked, Jack told a story about gifting your dad some hockey equipment. And even that story had a surprise twist around the letters and numbers JM18.
Yeah. In fact, I'll be candid, it blew me away. So I'm talking to Jack, and the next time so at the end of the first call, it wasn't a very long call, but I said, listen, Jack, can I call you again sometime? Well, if you think you have to. I don't know that I've got much more to tell you. And I said, okay, well, I'd like to. let me give it a couple of weeks and I'll give you a call. Okay, okay. So I waited for a couple of weeks, just like for my first date. Is it too soon? Is it too late? I'm not sure. Anyway, so I called him and he said, "Oh, Kevin, I was thinking, yeah, I saw your dad after that fact, after your grandfather's suicide." I said, "You did?" He said, "Yeah, yeah. When I was playing with the Leafs in my first season, I thought, you know what? I always liked Howard, and I'm going to go up and visit him." So Jack was living in the High Park area of Toronto at the time, and my father and his family were living in the Meadowvale part of, which is now Mississauga. So these are terms that many of you will not be able to understand completely, but it was quite a hike. And Jack decided he would take the bus up to see my dad up in Meadowvale. So he knocks on the door, and my grandmother answers, and he has to introduce herself because he hadn't seen her in so long. And hi, Aunt Jessie, it's Jack McLean, and I wanted to come by and say hello, and I wondered if Howard was around. And she said, "Well, welcome. I'm so nice to see you," and gave him a little hug. And she said, "Howard's down playing on the frozen Credit River right now, playing hockey with some of the boys from school. Why don't you go down to see him?" Well, Jack had lugged his duffel bag with him with equipment, so it was the right time. So he scuttled down the bank and pulled his skates on and went over to my dad, and my dad recognized him right away. And my dad called out to his friends, "I got Jack McLean," and he picked him as to be on his team. But my dad, who was he came from a very poor family, as I mentioned earlier. My grandmother wasn't left with anything at all, so they scraped by with the benefit of family members and cleaning houses and picking apples and whatever it took to get a little bit of money. So Dad would have had, who knows how old the skates were, and the stick could have been a branch with a little bit of a hook on it. Who knows? But all of a sudden, here he is playing hockey on the Credit River, and he's a hero to his pals because all of a sudden, there's a Toronto Maple Leaf playing hockey with us, for goodness sake. So Dad was a hero. They played for quite a while. Their feet were frozen, so they decided to come back up to Aunt Jessie, my grandmother's home, and they put their feet up against the potbelly stove and warmed up. And then Jack said, "Hey, Howard, this equipment's too heavy to take back. Do you want it?" You can imagine that his eyes probably popped out of his head. Again, his skates were probably hand-me-downs to the 5th or 6th degree, or figure skates, or who knows what they were. But anyway, to have the equipment was unbelievable. And Jack figured that he could get some more when he went down there, or buy it if he had to. So when I was talking to Jack in real time, he said, "So I left the equipment with your father." And I said, "Well, wait a minute, Jack. I've got my dad's hockey equipment in the garage." He said, "Well, if you look carefully on the gloves, I put JM18. In the shin pads, I put JM18. And he mentioned, whatever else he had there, the skates and a few things. Well, I looked, I couldn't see them on the gloves, so they may not have been Jack's, but there they were on the shin pads, and the inside, they were big clunky shin pads, and sure enough, JM18. I couldn't believe it. I had Jack's hockey equipment. Unbelievable.
I love that.
Unbelievable.
And the unbelievable continues. You mentioned surprise knocks on the door. Well, one day you drive to Ottawa to meet Jack in person.
Yeah, it was a pretty momentous day for me. I don't talk about I talk about it a lot, but I don't talk about it in detail all that much. I don't know that people know just exactly what it meant to me, but I finally convinced Jack to allow me to come up and meet him in face to face. And he said, "Okay, Red Lobster." What Red Lobster? and I said, "Well, listen, I'll come up and take you to dinner." "Yeah, Red Lobster." I said, "Oh, okay. Well, why don't we talk for a couple of hours and then I'll take you to dinner?" And he said, "Oh, that'd be great." So I made the plans and I drove up to Ottawa. And it was a wonderful trip, just of memories as I drove up. It's a 4-hour trip from Toronto to Ottawa, or thereabouts anyway. And I got there and I was nervous, really, really nervous. What kind of a reception was I going to get? I got the gruff guy over the phone, but what's he going to be like in person? Does he think that I'm there to get something? I'm there to get his money. I'm there to get his souvenirs, his artifacts. Who knows what he thinks? So I drive up, and finally the time comes. The designated time comes. I think it was 2:00. I should know. And I knock on the door, and a little elderly man comes to the door. And if he hadn't said his name, I would never, ever have known that it was the Jack McLean that I had been looking and researching, looking at pictures and researching. Jack, when he was playing, was probably 5'8" and 160 pounds, but tough as nails. Good looking guy with wavy blonde hair. But the man who came to the door was quite feeble. He was bent over. He had a bit of a hunched back to him. His hair was beautiful, and now it was white, but he still had a great deal of hair. He was wearing glasses. He was quite feeble. And I realized, yeah, there we are there. That's the day I met Jack McLean. Please excuse my hair. And, and we sat and just had a wonderful, wonderful talk. But I could tell that he was done talking after about an hour and a half, maybe an hour and 45 minutes. So I knew it was time to pack up, and said, Jack, what do you say? Why don't we go over to Red Lobster? And oh, he was so thrilled. He pulled on his jacket and his shoes and was out the door before I could even reach down to tie my shoes at that time. So we had a great meal, and that became a bit of a tradition as well. I would go up and see Jack. At the first little while was every couple of months, then it became once a month, then it became every couple of weeks, and there was always a meal. It was either Red Lobster or the Chinese buffet. Those are the only two that he ever went to at that time. Sorry, with me anyway, and sit and talk and just had a grand time. And I was able to open some doors. Because I'd done so much research, I was able to say, okay, now Jack, tell me about and whatever. And geez, I forgot all about that. And then he'd be able to think for a moment and come back with some wonderful stories that filled in my hockey history of that era and the family history as well. And the hockey era that I referenced, it was different. It was the Second World War. There were a lot of players who had moved on from the Toronto Maple Leaf lineup to go and serve their country. So they needed to fill spots. And Jack was one of those. He probably wouldn't have played in the National Hockey League had it not been for the Second World War. He was a prodigious junior hockey player with an orphan team called the Toronto Young Rangers. Didn't have an affiliation at all. Every other one was affiliated with, the NHL teams at that time, but not the Toronto Young Rangers. But Jack was the leading scorer there, and he learned to fight there, and he really was guided along there. So his name was on different prospective rosters. In fact, he was called to go to Montreal for the Canadiens. And when he got there, in a story very similar to Ted Kennedy, found out that his name was already on the protected list for the Leafs. So he was happy to come home. He didn't want to play in Montreal, but if it was going to mean a paycheck or whatever, that was great. But
let me stop you for a second.
Yeah, sorry.
Before
Yes,
you move on. You mentioned the Rangers.
Yeah.
And this is an amazing photo. It's in the book.
Yeah.
So I'd like you to tell me, because part of the beauty of your book is that a lot of names, known and unknown, weave through the narrative.
Right.
And tell me about the people in this photo.
So I'm going to start with the gentleman in the middle. And that's a guy named Ed Wildey. Ed Wildey was a local man. He worked in a mechanic shop, but he also had worked in hockey circles for a long time. He'd been a boxer when he was younger. But Ed Wildey was like a second father to Jack. Jack's father was preoccupied. He didn't spend a lot of time with Jack. And at one point, he decided that Jack and his sisters, Jack's three sisters, younger sisters, should live with Aunt Kate and Uncle Ed, who were his Jack's mother's family. And so he didn't really have that father presence other than Uncle Ed. Ed Wildey was, in fact, not Uncle Ed. They called him Uncle Ed, but he wasn't actually blood relative. But Ed Wildey was like a father to Jack McLean. And Jack, how Ed Wildy kept the Toronto Young Rangers going is beyond belief. On a wing and a prayer with no money to speak of. He didn't. He got all the lesser things. He convinced Conn Smythe that to get some ice time, and Conn Smythe said, "Well, okay, you can have from, I think it was from 5:30 until 7 in the morning, something like that." Anyway, well, I mean, the transportation at the time wasn't as efficient as it is today. So the boys either had to walk there or hitchhike or do something to get there as well. And it was pretty wild. But Ed Wildy, who didn't know a great deal about hockey, he had this hockey team and he nurtured people along. The gentleman on the left is a man who is an honored member in the Hockey Hall of Fame. That's Herb Carnegie. Herb Carnegie got his start with the Toronto Young Rangers as far as the junior side goes, and he was an amazing player. When Jack was first brought on to the Toronto Young Rangers, he was not allowed to play for the first couple of years because he was too young, but he was signed as a commitment to the team. The star of the team was Herb Carnegie, who was an amazing skater, a hell of a stick handler, and his story there is really unfortunate. They were practicing one of those early mornings that I referenced, and Ed Wildy called him over to the bench and said, "See that man up there?" And he pointed to Conn Smythe. And the story goes that Ed Wildy said, "That man says if he could turn you white, he would sign you." And it destroyed Herb. To the day of his death, it destroyed Herb, that his dreams of being like his heroes, Busher Jackson, Charlie Conacher, Joe Primo, would never come true because of his color. And Ed Wildy was the one who pointed that out to him, and it broke his heart. The gentleman on the right-hand side is another name that we know. He's also in the Hockey Hall of Fame as a builder. Both of those men are. And that's Punch Imlach. Punch Imlach also played junior with the Toronto Young Rangers. And here they are at Ed Wildy's retirement party. And Herb Carnegie and Punch Imlach were letting Ed Wildy know just what he meant to them and their careers, both as men and as hockey players as well. Both said that a lot of the lessons they learned from Ed Wildy and the Toronto Young Rangers came from Ed Wildy back in the day, and they brought them to their professional careers as well.
Wonderful. One more question before we start delving into Jack McLean's Toronto Maple Leaf career. You make an interesting comment in the book. Quote, "The NHL's most critical era took place during the Second World War." Now, with the caveat that, of course, everything pales in comparison to the war effort. But how was the NHL affected?
Well, it was dramatic and drastic. There were so many people who wanted to serve their country. The jingoistic element of the National Hockey League, for the most part, it's not entirely, but was very, very strong. In the case of the Toronto Maple Leafs, Conn Smythe tried to convince all of his players and his signees, as it were, who were playing in different levels, that they should get their training up front so that if they got called, they could serve their country and go from there. Jack, in fact, was an Air Force recruit, and he was taking his training that way should he have to go and serve his country. But different things happened during that time. In 1942, the league lost a team. They lost the Brooklyn Americans. The Brooklyn Americans had been in the league for a number of years. They were called, previous to that last season that they had, the New York Americans. And in 1941-42, after finishing last, they were put on hold at that time. So when the original six era, in effect, started in 1942-43. We talk about it being much earlier than that, but that's not the case at all. Different things happened. There was a rubber shortage as well. So if pucks went into the crowd, you better throw it back. You had to throw the pucks back on the ice. Now you see the players flipping them over the ice willy-nilly. It's a whole different world, of course, but they had to throw the pucks back at that time. They added a center line as well, which really threw the players off. It changed the elements of the game too. The red line really changed the flow of the game, but it made it a little bit faster as well. So there are a lot of things that changed, but there were so many people who went off to the war that there were a lot of either players whose careers, for the most part, had come to an end. They got another year or two out of it, or they had the young hockey players, the guys like Jack McLean coming to fill in the rosters as well. And so that's what it was like for those two specific years, 42, 43 over to 1944, 45.